Is CC DeVille one of the worst guitar players from the 80s? No, he isn't! Hey guys, welcome back to the Bald Shredder channel. I'm here today to talk to you about one of my biggest pet peeves. And, you know, I'm an 80s guy. I grew up in the 80s, that's when I learned to play guitar. All my favorite bands are from the 80s. I love the 80s. So, it really irritates me when I see other people criticizing some of the most famous and most popular guitar players from 80s hard rock bands, like CC DeVille, or Mick Mars, or if you even go back even further to the 70s and then into the 80s, Ace Frehley. I get so tired of people ragging on guys like that, like CC and Mick Mars and Ace, and saying that they're not very good and that they're sloppy and they don't even compare to the other ones that, you know, people consider to be the greats, like Eddie Van Halen, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, George Lynch, Yngwie Malmsteen, etc. Those comparisons are ridiculous, first of all. And who's to say what makes a great guitar player and what doesn't make a great guitar player? It's all about personal judgment anyway. And what do you like in a guitar player? What do you like in a guitar solo? What do you want to hear? What do you not want to hear? Everybody has a different opinion on that. So when people talk about, you know, oh, he's terrible or he's great, they're just opinions. They're not facts. And so guys like CC DeVille, Mick Mars, Ace Frehley, and I'm just naming those three, but there's a ton of them other than those guys. They deserve all the credit that they get. And then some. In fact, they don't get enough credit for the things that they've accomplished on guitar. Sure, they're not gonna make top 10 greatest guitar players lists of all time. You know, they're not gonna be up there with Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen and Slash and all those guys. And that's fine. They don't need to be. But let's talk about what they have accomplished and what they've contributed to the world of music and guitar. It's a lot of stuff. All right, let's talk about CC and Poison, for example. They sold a lot of records, millions. They were all over MTV, all over the radio, huge tours, and they're still on a huge tour right now this summer, the stadium tour with Motley, Crue, and Def Leppard. Oh, and guess what? They've been getting rave reviews, and CC in particular, putting on a great show, doing his own unaccompanied solo and playing part of Eruption, and people talking about how great it is. It doesn't matter if he's a little bit sloppy here and there, or he doesn't have the best vibrato, or maybe his tone wasn't perfect. You know, you could nitpick and criticize on pretty much any guitar player. But think about the impact. You know, people love those Poison songs. The Poison fans do. I know not everybody loves Poison, but they've got a lot of fans. Those songs mean something to people. And, you know, CC is part of that. He wrote those guitar riffs, at least some of them. He played the solos on those songs. You gonna say that nobody thinks those solos are great? Or that those solos aren't timeless or anything like that? Because I just don't think that's true. I mean, imagine some of the classic Poison songs. Talk Dirty to Me, Unskinny Bop, Don't Need Nothing But a Good Time. I mean, come on, think about in your head. Listen, in your head. Remember the solo? Can you imagine those songs with a different solo? With an Eddie Van Halen solo? With an Yngwie Malmsteen solo? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. You wouldn't want to hear those songs with a different solo, even if they were considered to be a better guitar player. I wouldn't want to hear those songs with a different solo, because then it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't sound like Poison. And the same can be said for Ace Frehley and Mick Mars. Can you imagine those Motley Crue songs with a different solo? Mick's a good guitar player. He had a monster tone. He still does. He's tearing it up on the stadium tour this summer. And what about Ace Frehley? No, he's not the most technically amazing guitar player. You know, fairly basic in his soloing ideas, a pentatonic, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Can you name another guitar player who inspired more kids to pick up the guitar and wanted to be a rock star than Ace Frehley in the mid-late 70s? Kids saw him. They saw the pictures. Maybe their parents took them to the concert. They saw them in magazines, on TV, and there's Ace Frehley, who in my opinion was by far the coolest looking member of the band, had the coolest name. He's got a guitar with rockets firing off of it, smoke coming out of it, and kids are watching that going, I want to do that. Now, is it because he was the most amazing guitarist? No, but that doesn't matter. Again, what was his impact on the guitar community? How many people play guitar now, these days, decades later, because they wanted to be Ace Frehley when they were a kid? That right there has value. It has a lot of value. And again, if you loved those classic Kiss songs and you were a huge fan, you wouldn't want to hear those songs with different solos. Would you want Vinnie Vincent to go back and re-record all those Ace Frehley solos? Of course not. It would be ridiculous. It just wouldn't sound the same. So my point is, guys, we shouldn't be sitting around criticizing other guitar players, saying they're sloppy, they're not as good as this guy, they're not the best, whatever. You know, they've had an impact on music. They've had an impact on their fans. They've inspired people to pick up the guitar and play. People go to the concerts and they have a great time. They're watching them. It's affecting them emotionally. That has power. It always has and it always will. And this is not a criticism of the other kind of players, the more technical, you know, better players, I guess you could say. People like Yngwie, Eddie Van Halen, George Lynch, Nuno Bettencourt, you know, there's a whole slew of them. Those are great players, and I love those guys, of course. But you have to look at the overall picture, not just, well, who can play the fastest solo? Who can play the cleanest arpeggio? Is that the only thing that's important? Is that the most important thing? I think not. Anybody who's out there and they've been doing it for decades, like CC, Ace Frehley, Mick Mars, and a whole slew of others, and they're still doing it decades later. They're still out there playing concerts. They still have fans coming because they want to see them. That is to be admired. Because how many people like me would have loved to hit the rock stardom, right? And sold millions of records, been on MTV, been on huge stages playing in front of tens of thousands of people. Most of the people are like me, and we never achieved that, never even came anywhere near that. It's only a small amount of guys that actually, you know, found that huge success. So if anything, we should be saying, like, hats off to these guys. They did something that very few people have been able to achieve. All right, guys, so that's basically all I have to say about it. You know, sorry, that's my rant. My rant is over now. So what do you guys think about all that? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed already, guys, please hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.